Proverbs chapter 23. Verse 1 says, When you sit down to eat with a ruler, consider carefully what is before you, and put a knife to your throat. And put a knife to your throat. If you are a man given to appetite, do not desire his delicacies, for they are deceptive food. All right, so if you're going to have fellowship with a ruler, we might say a politician in our culture, just be careful, especially if they're inviting you because you're a Christian. Chuck Smith wouldn't go. He had invitations to the White House from time to time, and he just said, all they want is a photo op to be able to say, see this little group of pastors that endorse me. And so be careful about when you go, why you go. Consider it before you go. And even you say, well, I'm not likely to get an invite from the president. Maybe not, but we could from local politicians and that kind of thing. So just consider why they might want you to go. And maybe it's not even a politician type of thing. Maybe it's something else, but somebody else of authority or perceived authority. Especially if you're somebody given to a big appetite, right? So you just want to go, you want to dive in, and the appetite may not necessarily be about food, but that was one thing that they would do. Rulers would put on a big banquet, to have people come in, and part of that was to show how big, and it was to show off their wealth, how big the banquet would be, how many people would show up, the utensils and all made of precious metals and that kind of thing. And it was all a put on to get support from those who would come, and so just be careful. Not everybody who is trying to get your favor toward them necessarily has the idea to return that back to you. And it's very, all he says, that don't desire his delicacies because they're deceptive food. There's a reason behind it. Just try to flesh that out before you go. Do not overwork to be rich, because of your own understanding cease. Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like an eagle toward heaven. Right? So don't overwork to be rich. Don't just spend all of your time to be rich or to try to be rich. That's your focus. You don't want that to be your focus. I'm going to put all of my effort into being wealthy. That's not good. It's not good for you. It's not good for your family. In fact, it may cause you to end up to be without a family. You could lose the one you have, or you could just never, ever have one and end up being alone anyways. It says, will you set your eyes on that which is not? All right, so you've not achieved it, but everything is heading toward that. And for riches certainly make themselves wings, then they fly away like an eagle toward heaven. So one of the examples that I heard was, and sometimes I pick on lottery winners. We're not going to pick on a lottery winner tonight. Pick on the NFL players. Those guys, their whole life, from childhood, their parents are pumping it into them. But it is to go, to be competitive, to be seen, right? Look at me, look at me, look at me. Put on put in the time, and it's not like, they don't work hard. They develop a talent, for sure. But you can see some changes in a lot of the young players when they get into the pros, and all of a sudden they're not as good as they were in college because, man, they got the contract. They are locked in. They've got the money. And, all they got to do is be in a game to get paid. And they don't even have to be in a whole game to get paid. They just got to get in the game to get paid. And, if you get above the league minimum, which is still a lot of money, you have things that make you want to be more active within the game. So number of games played, amount of time played. If you start, you get bonuses and incentives. That's what I was trying to go for. But they make all this wealth. They get their endorsements. They get, whatever. If they can be seen and they can be the big name or one of the big names on the field, they get wealthy pretty fast. And the statistic is, now think about, NFL players don't play for very long typically. I know Tom Brady's 44 years old. He's an old man on a football team or on a football field. He's not on a sideline. He's in the game still. He's an old man to be playing a game. They don't typically play as long as he was played. 5 years is pretty good, and especially to be at the top of your game because you're taking a beating being out there if you are out there. But the statistic is that 78% of those players are bankrupt or severely financially stressed within 2 years of retirement. So you think a guy in his early 30s who's made millions of dollars, playing a game on weekends, and doing commercial endorsements and all that. They're not all the Michael Jordans and the other guys who make sure that they understand not just how to make the money, but what to do with the money and secure the money and be able to live, and do well with it and how to make more money. I mean, he's somebody who's a businessman. So there's the exceptions like that, like Michael Jordan. Like him or hate him, he's a good businessman, obviously, and has known how to not just make money as a young guy playing a game, but afterwards maintain that and increase it even more. But 78% are bankrupt or severely financially stressed by the time they're only 2 years out of retirement. That's, for all the look at me, for all the attention you got, that's a huge price tag to pay. And they don't bother to learn that end of their life. As long as the paycheck's coming in, I can keep my entourage, I can keep the big house with all my buddies and whatever else they do. I can go to all the big Hollywood parties and date the actresses or whatever they're doing. They can have that high life for that time while they're in there. But man, get hurt and all of a sudden your value drops. Get hurt again and you're on your way out of the league. Or even just drop in your abilities because you're not as focused on that anymore. and most of them are content to not ever win a championship. They're not in there, most of them, to win Super Bowls and all of that. They're just there to get paid, get the paycheck and go. So I thought that was pretty sad. Now I know, like I said, I pick on lottery winners all the time. They're not much better. I don't know what the statistic is, but they go bankrupt pretty fast too. So to put all your focus in on that, to be wealthy, to be rich, like he says, it grows wings and it flies away. And with the way our economy is as fragile as it is, you can lose a lot of money really fast, even if you are a business person. All it takes is one other person to do some kind of dirty deal, man, your money's gone. So that can't be or shouldn't be our focus in life, to be able to reach some financial level of security and put our security in that. Man, if we haven't learned that with this whole pandemic thing, that our security can't be in our money, wealthy people couldn't get what they wanted to get. It didn't matter how much money you had; it didn't get there. And so, anyways, that's what he's talking about there. And Solomon certainly would have had experience in that. Now, he was wealthy, but he surely saw other people who were also very wealthy around him, trying to be in his presence, that would see fortunes come and go. So, verse 6. I'm like, Why am I looking up at here? Okay. Anyway, verse 6 says, do not eat the bread of a miser, nor desire his delicacies, for he thinks in his heart, for as he thinks in his heart, so he is. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. The morsel you have eaten, you will vomit up and waste your pleasant words. And so, if somebody is not known for being generous, when they are, there's something behind that. And so you've talked about a king who would be, might flaunt his riches all the time and might always, or make a ritual out of showing off and spending to, that we talked about in the first couple of verses there, to impress folks. But somebody who is known to not care and to hold on tight and to not let go of anything. When they do let go, there's a reason for it. And if they all of a sudden are trying to play off the same kind of part that the king would, be careful. Right? Don't desire what he's putting out there. Be sharp when you're dealing with these people. Just pay attention. Because it's gonna, excuse me. There's a ulterior motive to those things, and whatever good thing they've put out, it's going to come back out. You're not going to be able to handle it when you find out the real reason for the unusual behavior of a person like that. Verse 9, do not speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of your words. And if you can't see that playing out today, it's not even funny. I mean, you've got to open your eyes if you can't see it. It's so bad. It's so backwards. It's so upside down. I'm gonna stay off of it. Do not remove the ancient landmarks, neither enter the fields of the fatherless. For the Redeemer is mighty; he will plead their cause against you. Okay, so when I saw "do not remove the do not remove the ancient landmarks," right away, and we had last week or the week before a verse or a proverb about landmarks, about monuments, and I kind of addressed what we've seen happen here, but not just here. It happened, in Russia when the communists took over. They pulled down the statues, they pulled down the landmarks, and so that's all I saw at first. And I'm like, here we go again. Only if you read the whole thing, you get the idea here. So he's talking about property lines, right? So you don't want to remove the old or the ancient landmarks. He would have been talking about when Israel came into the land, the landmarks and the tribal property lines that Joshua set up, or that he had set up, or the people set up as they took possession of the land. Don't move those. I mean, the property lines and pieces of property were meant to be handed down to the family. They weren't meant to be sold. They weren't meant to be moved or stolen. And I think when you read farther into that, like, nor enter the field of the fatherless, he's talking about taking advantage of a property line, of moving it over, making it look like you have more, or just a little bit at a time. You're taking some of your neighbor's property, and we still have that today. It happens today. A man puts up a fence and puts it a little too close to the neighbor's property line. Well, the fence is already up, and it's just a foot. Well, what happens if the next guy comes around and wants to change your fence, and he puts it up, and it's just a foot farther? In the meantime, the other guy's having his yard, chewed up a little bit at a time. And if he doesn't do anything legally about it, then eventually, over time, it just becomes a part of the other person's property. So he's talking about people who are taking advantage of that and stealing. So when somebody has a field but they're fatherless, an adult orphan, somebody who could work the field, and maybe he comes of age, he can work the field so that he can begin to provide for himself and maybe for a family. But he goes out to his field and he finds that, again, his neighbor has moved the marks over, and what are you going to do about it? How do you go back? So this is almost like a warning from Solomon, who was a king, who saw a lot of dirty dealings, right? I mean, you can think of the two ladies who came. The one had rolled over on her child and killed it in the night, and then swapped it out with the lady next to her and tried to claim her baby as her own. And comes before Solomon, and Solomon says, well, I can solve this. We'll just cut the baby in half and you can both have half. And the one who was the real mother said, no, just let her have the baby. She wanted her child to live, and so he gave her, the one who objected, he knew was the rightful mother, and gave her the baby. So he saw the dirty dealings all the time, right? Those things came before the king. And that's the point of verse 11. For their Redeemer is mighty. He's saying, listen, you might even be able to fool the king. But that Redeemer, the word Redeemer there is a capital R. He's talking about the Lord. The Lord is mighty. He sees, he notices. And how many warnings have we had to take care of the orphans, to take care of the fatherless or the widows? And even when we went through the minor prophets a few years ago, we saw that was sometimes the charge against certain people in Israel or in Judah, that they were taking advantage of the orphans and the widows and putting them out in the street and taking their homes. And so he's saying, you basically, again, you won't get away with it. You may think you fooled the king. You may think that you fooled and got one over on somebody, but God's watching. You don't get one over on him. Verse 12 says, apply your heart to instruction and your ears to words of knowledge. Okay? So don't just apply the words to your heart. You can hide the word of God in your heart so that you won't sin against him, but you need to apply your heart, put your heart into the instruction. In other words, put your heart into actually doing what you're learning and not just taking it in. Verse 13, do not withhold correction from a child, for if you beat him with a rod, he will not die. You shall beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. Now, again, it starts right off with the word correction in the beginning. So this isn't, go out and get an axe handle and beat your child till he can barely walk. That's not what he's talking about. It is talking about corporal punishment, for sure. I mean, he's not saying don't hold back the beating, but it's to correct. It's not to hurt. It's not to maim. It's not to be abusive. That's not what he's talking about. That doesn't correct anything. That will set the bitterness, and that will set rebellion if you're doing it in an abusive way. You'll harden that child's heart rather than soften it and bring him or her into a right relationship. But the implication too, though, is that if you don't correct your child, and John Corson said that's one of the most selfish things you can do, to not correct your child, to just try to appease them, to try to be their friend, to do anything but do the hard thing and be the parent, because you don't want to, because you don't want to feel the pain of that, because you don't want to feel the rejection of your child. Because certainly there are times that as you're trying to correct your child and your words are rejected or they're rebelled against, or your actions, your rules are rebelled against, that doesn't feel good. But you've got to be brave enough to be a parent above being a friend, above being a buddy. And the idea is that you're creating an adult. You're not creating a child. Right? You're not creating an adult child. You don't want your son or your daughter to be childish as adults. You want them to grow up, and they may not like the correction at the time, but even the writer of Hebrews talks about that in our relationship with God. It's never pleasant for the moment, but it brings about good fruit in a person's life. Later, you learn the lesson here. It's a painful lesson, but you learn, and maybe you have to, maybe you make the lesson drawn out longer than it needs to be because you're going to rebel and kick back. But the idea is that you love them enough that you want them to be able to be good adult citizens in their community, productive people within the church, those who love God. And guarantee you, if you do that, you may never hear this from your child, but down the road, they're going to start hearing you come out of their mouth. The things that you say that bring correction, when they have their own little one walking around, your words are going to come out of their mouth because it's going to be implanted in them. You cared enough to make them care. They may not care right at the moment, but when they become older and they have that life to have to take care of, all of a sudden, the things that you taught them because you cared about them, now they're trying to teach your grandchildren. So, hey, I've got number 6 grandchild possibly on the way here tonight. Not here, but into this world tonight. And, it could be why my phone keeps going off. And silence grandma. Anyways, anyhow, they're both young. We've had the headbutting going on, it not like a continuous thing, but we've had it, and I thought about this when I was reading this today. I can't wait because in 5 years, or just between 5 and 10 years, my words are going to be coming out of his mouth, and I can't wait. It's going to be great. Even if I'm not there to see it or to hear it, it's going to be good. And I get to hear it because I've heard Hope and Matt. I hear my words come out of their mouth, and it's generational words. It's words that came out of my grandfather's mouth. It's words that came out of my dad's mouth. Now it's coming out of my kid's mouth. It's great. Oh, where did I leave off? That was good. Oh, anyways, you shall beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. There you go. I may have even put that on a tag from time to time, especially with my boys. Just delivering you from hell right now, buddy. But anyways, verse 15, my son, if your heart is wise, my heart will rejoice. Indeed, I myself, yes, my inmost being will rejoice when your lips speak right things. That kind of goes right along with what I just said. Right? My heart, in fact, you just saw me get happy at the thought of my son repeating things that I've taught him. But if your heart is wise, my heart will rejoice. I mean, honestly, and you know what? We kind of, as parents, we need to take that in. If you're a parent, you need to take that in and remember, rather than the I told you so's coming out, that can just stay in your heart. You can get your own little good feeling about that in your heart. But to rejoice when they make good decisions, when they're being good parents, when they're doing what's right before God, man, we need to rejoice. We need to be thankful for that. And listen, deep, I think. And it says, yes, my inmost being will rejoice when your lips speak right things. If I saw one of my sons or my grandson even just a couple of weeks ago to see Emma up here with Rob and Melinda when Tracy wasn't even here. Her mom wasn't even here with her. To see her up there, singing and trying to be a part of that. Or to have her come on Saturdays with us when we do the food thing and the food pantry and such. I love it. In fact, she and I even had a conversation about that just yesterday. We had a couple minutes alone. We were talking about some things and the way that she reacted to something. But I made a point of taking it all the way around to that, how good it makes me feel that she wants to be here for those things. So I think we need to tell them. We need to make sure our kids know that's what gives us joy. To have my kids. I mean, sometimes when we're at camp, the little kids that we work with will make you cry. They raise their hands and they're worshiping, and you're not even sure all the time if they really know what they're doing, but they're doing it and they're getting into their music, or they're sitting still and they're listening, and it'll make you cry a little bit. But then in our case, I get to look around and I see my kids, and they're into this, and the son-in-laws are into helping and being with the little kids, and my grandkids, Lucy, sometimes is, they'll skip their classes and come and help, May and Pops with their class and teach and do hand motions or whatever the songs. And to see that generational thing, I am blessed beyond what I could ever imagine. That I am more wealthy than Bill Gates will ever be, just seeing that. That's good. Verse 17 says, so do not let your heart envy sinners, but be zealous for the fear of the Lord all the day. For surely there is a hereafter, and your hope will not be cut off. So don't envy the heart or don't let your heart envy the sinners. We saw some of the psalmists, David and I think Asaph as well, kind of struggle with that. I don't know that it was necessarily, I want to benefit the way they are, but why does it seem, they weren't afraid to ask the question of God, why does it seem like the wicked prosper? Why are they prospering? Why, and they were in a position to not have to worry. I mean, certainly David wasn't like, well, I'm not prospering. He was the king. He had wealth. He had prosper when he knew that there were righteous in the land that didn't. So don't be in that position where, or let yourself get in that position where your heart says, you know what, the sinners have it all. That guy may be a wicked man, or that woman may be a wicked woman, but they're sure living a lot easier life than I am. We don't want to go there. Instead, we need to be zealous for the fear of the Lord all the day. And the implication here is all of our days. Be zealous for the fear of the Lord, for the respect of God. Not for his toward us, but for us toward him. Protect that. Because if we fear God, then we live a life that is going to honor him no matter what the cost here. We know one day, in Matthew, I think 25 is going to say, maybe I'm getting this mixed up from another spot, but in worn out and beaten bloody, when we move into the presence of the Lord, all that goes away. And to the rest that God has for us, the completion of our peace, of our joy, to move into eternity, to have on and be clothed, fully clothed with his righteousness, to be changed and have that new body. That's what we live for. It says, for surely there is a hereafter, and your hope will not be cut off. That promise. He's promised. I'm not cutting you off. You're my servant. You're coming home. Verse 19, hear my son and be wise, and guide your heart in the way. Do not mix with winebibbers or with gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and drowsiness will clothe a man with rags. All right, so here, listen up, be wise, and guide your heart in the way. Not let your heart guide you in the way. Guide our heart. Our heart is going to want to go with all of this, right? With the drunkards, the winebibbers, the partiers. We're going to want to go in the direction where we see a lot. I mean, I think the wine bibber or the drunkard or the gluttonous implies excess. They're living in excess of what they're eating, in excess of what they're drinking and getting drunk. Their life is a life of excess and not not balance, not humility, none of the things that keep your heart right. Your heart is going to want to go towards that. They look like they're having a great time. They look like, it's a good thing. They look like they have a lot, like they're experiencing a lot. Don't let your heart take you that way. You guide your heart in the way. And so it's not just, if God doesn't want me to do it, he'll stop me from doing it. No, you put his word in your heart. You know what's right. You know what's wrong. Now you guide your heart away from the things that it desires. Because we know in Jeremiah it says that the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. So don't follow your heart. You hear that a lot. Don't even follow your heart. Just do what your heart tells you. Follow your heart. That gets Christians into more trouble and makes them say the dumbest things like, God's okay with me divorcing my wife. Or it's okay for me to do this drug because it's natural. God made it. It must be there for me to enjoy. No. And we'll say things like, I have a peace about this. I'm okay. I have a peace about this. John Corson again points out rightly that Jonah was at peace. He was asleep in the belly of the ship in the storm. He was sleeping. He was at peace with his decision. It was going to wreck everybody around him, but he was at peace with it. And he was at peace with being thrown overboard even. And God, because he's better to go and die in the ocean than it is to go and deliver a message from God to my enemy. So just because we're at peace with something doesn't mean we're guiding our heart. Our heart may be guiding us. We can convince ourselves real fast and real easy that we can be at peace with the decision that we're making without considering whether or not it honors God. And so don't mix with these others. Don't mix with the gluttonous. Don't mix with the drunkard. Listen, we don't need to run our ministries from inside of bars. We just don't. Do I want you to stay away from alcoholics and not ever deliver the gospel to them? No. I want you to do that. I just don't want you to go to their place to do it. Right? I don't think we need to. And you hear a lot of people that have these ministries supposedly where they go to bars and they go to strip clubs and they go, you're not. You're mixing with these people and you're doing the wrong thing. It's not right. It's just not right. Don't do that. They're going to come to poverty. They may think that because they have a lot and they can live in excess that they are rich, but they are not. It says the glutton will come to poverty and drowsiness will clothe a man with rags. You hear the stories. I've even seen things happen where, because, I did the dumb thing. It was mixing with these people. But you see people, somebody passes out from too much to drink and everybody's, practical joke on the guy, and he wakes up with things drawn on his face or, in clothes that aren't his or whatever, just whatever they want to with them. You just become the object of ridicule to do that. So don't mix with that. It's not good. and I can look back on that stuff and it's just not good. It's not good. It wasn't good even then. Verse 22 says, listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old. All right, so I think, again, the implication here is to honor your parents, even when they're old. It's not honor your parents as long as they can be a productive part of your life. Honor your parents to the end, to their end. Right? You care for them, you take care of them, you don't, you're not talking about, complaining about how bad it is. I have heard people who have, and even seen it, people who have dementia, and you sit and you talk with them. They're still pretty functional, but they're going to tell you the same story 10 times in 15 minutes, like it's the first time they ever told you. And, what do you do but smile and say, oh, yeah, you just kind of play along with them because they can't. But the frustration of other people, and I get sometimes it's day in and day out, but even people who aren't day in and day out with it, just, that person finally goes away, they're taken to their home or whatever, and then to hear him complain about that. And the situation I'm thinking of in my mind was not about a parent, but about an aunt, and the person who was complaining wasn't even the caregiver of this person. But I'm just like, why are you complaining about it? It was fun. She was sweet. She stayed sweet the whole time. She just kept saying, who cares if she tells the same story over and over again? You know what's going to happen? I'm not going to forget the story. So, it might be my story when I get old now. I don't know. Who knows? But nonetheless, just honor the elderly all the way to the end. I gotta go back to marking my spots. Here we are. All right. Buy the truth and do not sell it. Also, wisdom and instruction in understanding. Threw me a little bit when I first read this, but it means to buy into the truth. So buy the truth. Take the truth. Everything you have into the truth. So obviously the obvious, or to me anyways, is be all in on God's word. Right? Right. Yeah. Seek it. You want to gather it. You want to collect it. You want to possess the word of God and wisdom and instruction and understanding. And don't sell it. Don't sell out on it, in other words, right? So don't be the person who just sells out and, I have enough or have a little or I don't want a lot. Don't sell out on God's word. Buy into it. Verse 24, the father of the righteous will greatly rejoice, and he who begets a wise child will delight in him. Let your father and your mother be glad, and let her who bore you rejoice. And it goes along with some of the others that we just covered, but the father of the righteous will greatly rejoice. And I've already given you my examples with my kids and all. I've got friends who have had the same experiences and stuff. It's great. It's amazing. But again, it's not just a child who just does whatever or just does something good. We're talking about the righteous child. One who's seeking righteousness, one who's following after God. My son, give me your heart and let your eyes observe my ways. For a harlot is a deep pit, and the seductress is a narrow well. She also lies in wait as for a victim and increases unfaithful. Hard time reading all of a sudden. And increases the unfaithful among men. All right, so give me your heart. Let your eyes observe my ways. Now, you would think this had to have been written before Solomon had, 300 wives and 700 concubines or whatever he had. Don't do what I do. but he's saying here, and maybe he is. Maybe he's, give me your heart. Hear what I'm saying. Don't do what I do. See what I've done? Look around. See what I've done to myself? Don't do that. For a harlot is a deep pit. You're not going to get away. Right? That's a slippery slope when you start going after that kind of immorality. It's a pit. It's a trap. And she or the immorality is not an increase of good among men. It's an increase in unfaithfulness among men. Verse 29. Try again. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contention? Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who linger long at the wine, those who go in search of the mixed wine. Do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. At the last, it bites like a serpent, it stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. Yes, you will be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, or like one who lies at the top of the mast, saying, They have struck me, but I was not hurt. They have beaten me, but I did not feel it. When shall I awake that I may seek another drink? Right, so who has the woe? Who has the sorrow? Who has just a horrible heart? Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contention, complaints, wounds without cause, and redness of eyes? Those who linger long at the wine. This is, I think, a lifetime. This is what we would call a full alcoholic, somebody who lives for another drink. You look at verse 35, and they may be sick, they may be passed out. You know, that's the whole idea, I think, of the lying like one in the midst of the sea, like somebody who's seasick, you know, or who lies at the top of the mast. Somebody at the top of the mast was one who was supposed to be looking out for land, looking out for that which was stable, not one who's laying down and tossed back and forth and whatnot. Now, at times, or not at times, but you have to, when the Bible's talking about wine, you have to kind of look at the context of it, because they didn't have a different word for juice in alcohol wine, the fermented wine. So you have to look at the context of what's being said. That's why a lot of people kind of get it wrong when it talks about wine, especially in the New Testament. And Jesus must have been all right with people getting drunk because he made water into wine, or, you know, people get drunk at Passover. And I've heard people today, because you have the 4 cups and you got to drink it all, and they fill it up and they slam it back, and then they're not watering it down if you're getting drunk. You're doing it wrong. You weren't allowed to get drunk at Passover. And that's what 1 Corinthians chapter 11 is all about. They were celebrating the Passover, but they were getting drunk at Passover. They weren't watering down the wine. So this is talking about somebody, and it describes, right, the fermented drink, not just juice from the grapes. It is turned to alcohol. So it says, do not look on the wine when it's red. And that's kind of, don't look at it, don't long after it, don't go for it, don't be around it, especially if you know you're weak toward it. Don't go around it. This is when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly, because at the last, it bites like a serpent. You're going to end up in trouble if you have a tendency toward that. Especially, maybe you've never had a drink, but you're somebody who struggles with wanting things in excess, like food. You like to eat. You can tell I like to eat. That is one of my struggles. If I have good food, I want to eat it all. I don't like to take home the little styrofoam box. And it's not because I don't care about, you know, or because I care so much about the planet or anything like that. I just don't want to have to carry that thing home. And I don't want to wait till it's in the refrigerator or get it out the next morning or whatever. I want to eat it all now. And in our country, we like to eat in excess. If we get small portions at a restaurant where we're paying money for this food, we don't like that. We won't go back. You know? So we want all the food on our plate. That's going to force us to take the box home. But instead of taking the box home, we want to knock it out. You know, And part of that is from growing up. When I was a skinny little kid, I could eat like crazy, and it didn't bother me, and I didn't gain any weight, and I just went outside and ran it off, you know. I could eat every day like it was Thanksgiving. It didn't bother me. But what it did do is it created in me this desire for something that I like. And it wasn't just food. It was things I like to drink, you know. And that translated in then to when I tasted alcohol that I liked, I would just keep drinking. And it didn't go well with me. And it doesn't go well with anybody else. You know, I think that was why it was, and I say this hesitantly, but it was kind of easy for me to get away from it. You know, it wasn't a habit that I had to have that, but when I had it, I had a lot. And it wasn't good. And you know, there are memories that are triggered by, at the last, it bites like a serpent. You know, if you've done it, if you've had alcohol to excess, even once, you know what they're talking about. Oh, this is horrible. Oh, this does not feel good. I do not want to ever do this again. You know, so it bites like a serpent, stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things. You know, your heart will utter perverse things. You're going to say things that you wouldn't normally say. You're going to do things you wouldn't normally do. And you're going to be just like people who want to do this all day long. Now, if you travel down that road after a warning, hopefully it's only one time for you and you're going, oh man, I remember what Pastor Glenn said, and he was right. And he read it out of the Bible, so God was right. God is telling you to stay away from it. Don't make it a day in, day out thing. It's not good. So many homes are broken because of alcohol. So many people's lives are ruined because of alcohol and because of their unwillingness to stay away from it. And it becomes that thing, you know, when, at the end of verse 35, when shall I wake up that I may seek another drink? Right? I can't wait to repeat the process. And I knew people like that. You know, some people get up in the morning and need their coffee. I've known people that had to get up in the morning and needed their beer just to be able to function. That's bad. That's really bad. You know, so we'll go ahead and end there tonight. I've given up on trying to move fast through these. We're gonna plod along the way the Lord wants us to, and that's just gonna be the way it is. If we pick up steam, it'll be on His inspiration. So let's pray. Lord, we thank you for your words and your instruction. And I pray, Lord, that we would take them all seriously. Lord, many of these sting because we've already broken them. We've already gone through some of this, but thankfully you've called us out of it, and we can look and say, yes, this is exactly, we know, unfortunately, what exactly you're talking about, and we can warn others. Listen, God's right. His word is right. He doesn't pull any punches. This is the correcting your child so that they will walk in righteousness and walk in a good life, a life that honors you, and they learn to look for their reward in the end. Lord, thank you for this instruction and for this wisdom. I pray that we would apply this to our hearts and that we would use it to guard and guide our hearts as you've instructed. Lord, be with us as we head home tonight now, and we ask that you would protect us, keep us safe. And Lord, if it's your will that we'd all be back together again on Sunday, Lord, be with those who are not feeling well. Be with our nation, Lord, and bring peace to our land. In Jesus' name, amen.